Okay, so today you should have that word problem packet in your notes to look at for notes today. You are obviously the note taker, so go ahead and write your name. And your objective today is going to be polynomial word problems. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at that first one. If a number is added to its square, so I have some number x and its square, x squared, and I'm going to add those together and my result is going to be 56. It would help if I wrote this in descending order, meaning that x squared, being the variable with the biggest exponent, goes first, then x, then plus 50, or then equals 56. So now I have this wonderful equation, but I'm used to not having anything over here. I want a 0 over there, so I can set things equal to 0 and use that 0 property. So I'm going to subtract 56 off both sides. So I should get x squared plus x minus 56 equals 0. If you need to do your factor and sum table, which I highly suggest you do, factors of negative 56 that sum to positive 1. I'm going to try negative 8 and positive 7. That's not positive 1. So I'll flip the signs. We'll try negative 7 and 8. That gives me positive 1. So I have x minus 7, x plus 8 equal to 0. 0 property says I set each one of those things equal to 0. So x minus 7 equals 0, and x plus 8 equal to 0. And then I solve. Over here, if I add 7 to both sides, I'll get x equals 7. Over here, if I subtract 8 from both sides, I get x equals negative 8. The 0 property part should not be new. In fact, most of this isn't. It's just reading the word problem, translating it into an expression that you can then manipulate and solve. So why don't you guys go ahead and try 2 on your own? So let's go ahead and work it out. And number x is subtracted, and I'm going to write it over here, is subtracted from its square. So x squared minus x, and that result is 72. Again, I'm going to move that 72 to the other side so that I have x squared minus x minus 72 equal to 0. I set up my factors and sums. Negative 9 and positive 8 should work. I factor it, x minus 9, x plus 8. I set both things equal to 0. And my two options for x then would be positive 9 and negative 8 once I solve both equations. Okay, so let's try number 3 together. A positive number. This is where your answer choices are going to matter, because on the past ones we've been getting a positive and a negative. Now we're going to solve for both, but we're only going to look at the positive answers. So a positive number is 30 less than its square. So that positive number is x is 30 less than its square, meaning that I should have, I'm sorry, not 30 first, but x squared minus 30. Again, I want to 0 on this side, so I'm going to move that x over. So I have x squared minus x minus 30. I go ahead and I factor that. So I get x minus 6, x plus 5. I'm sorry, I skipped my factor sum chart, but please go ahead and do that. I set them both equal to 0. X minus 6 equals 0. X plus 5 equals 0. And I solve. This one gives me x equals 6. This one gives me x equals negative 5. Now, if you read back in the problem, it said a negative number. So this x minus is, this x equal to a negative 5 can't work because I'm looking for a positive number. My positive number here is 6. So much in the same fashion, try this next one, number 4. A negative number is 42 less than its square. Find that number. Try that on your own. X equals negative 6 is my answer. Okay, let's try number 5. There we go. The length of a rectangle. So I'm going to first of all draw a rectangle. Drawing pictures is always a good idea. Okay, so there's my rectangle. And I know that the length is 8 more than its width. So I'm going to call the width x, and the length is x plus 8. This is going to be like what you're going to do for your project, other than you'll make up these dimensions, whereas this problem tells you. And I know the area is 105. So we know the area is length times width. So I'm going to multiply those together. X plus 8 times x, and that's going to equal 105. Well, this lonesome x kind of works like the distributive property. I'm going to distribute to both, so I get x squared plus 8x equals 105. If I move that 105 over, I'll have x squared plus 8x minus 105 equal to 0. I'm going to do my factor sum chart because I don't know this off the top of my head. Factors of negative 105 that sum to 8. Because I've worked this problem before, I'm going to go ahead and cheat a little bit and list the factors that do work. If you were working this on your own, you would have to list factors of negative 105. You know it's divisible by 5. It also happens to be divisible by 15 and negative 7. And oh, look at that. That'll give me a sum of 8. So I would factor it, x plus 15, x minus 7 equals 0. Using the 0 property, I set each of those equal to 0. X plus 15 equals 0. X minus 7 equals 0. And I solve. This one equals x equals negative 15. This one, x equals 7. Now the question is, it didn't say positive or negative in the problem, but it kind of did because we're talking about length. Can a length of something ever be negative? No. So, length is always positive. So I'm going to go ahead and cross out that negative 15, and we'll go with x equals 7. And that's just my width. So it's important to remember that we're asking for both dimensions. So I know this x is equal to 7, but I need to know what this x plus 8 is. Well, I plug that in. 7 plus 8 is 15. My dimensions are 7 by 15 centimeters on both of those so that we don't forget our units and Mr. Suddendorf doesn't yell at us. So this rectangle, try on your own. Drawing my rectangle, the length is 6 less than twice the width, so we don't know what the width is. We'll call it W, but we know that 2W minus 6 is the length. and that is equal to an area of 108. So 108 is equal to W times 2W minus 6. I distribute, so I get 2W squared minus 6W equal 108. I move that 108 to the other side. Looking at this, I'm seeing that all of these terms are even, so it might help if I take a 2 out before I start factoring away, which will not make this a 6W, but instead will make it a 3W and minus a 54. If you went ahead and multiplied 2 times negative 108 and did the factors of that sum to negative 6, that's fine. It should work that way. I just like to save myself some work, so I'm just going to do factors of negative 54 that sum to negative 3. And when I do this, I know that negative 9 and positive 6 work, so I'm going to factor that out. Using the 0 property, because all of these things are set equal to 0, I'm going to set each piece of this equal to 0, including that 2. But we know that 2 is not equal to 0, so that can't ever be an option. Again, length can never be negative, so I can go ahead and rule this answer out, and I'm left with W equals 9. So if W equals 9, then 2W minus 6, when I plug in 9 for W, 18 minus 6 is 12. So my dimensions are 9 times 12. And it did not give a unit. So we are good to go. Okay, the garden plot problem is a little tricky, especially when we're thinking about drawing it. So there's a garden plot that is 4 by 12. Let me draw that over again. I know I can do better. Well, I didn't really want a square. There we go, that's a nice rectangle. So this length is 4 and this is 12. We also know that it has a fence along one side, and oddly enough, it really doesn't tell us which side, but we're going to have some background information that tells us this side. This is the fence. And again, this side is 12, not 12, 4. So it also says the area of the garden is to be doubled. So right now the area is 4 times 12, which is 48. So the area to start with, or the area initial, if you're trying to impress Mr. Suddendorf, is 4 times 12, which is 48. And we want to double that in the end. So the new area should be 96. So to do that, I'm going to add a uniform bordered width on all these 3 sides, because I can't add things into the fence. So that means on this side, I'm going to add X. On this side, I'm going to add X. And on this side, I'm going to add X. So to this length, I now have, it was 4, and I've now added X. So that's X plus 12. Sorry. Let me see if I can explain it again. This was 4, and I've now added this new X. So now I have X plus 4. And this was